The massive Hegemony warship broke through the clouds above New York City. Its dark metal hull blocked the sun and cast shadows over the skyscrapers below. People stopped in the streets to look up. Some ran in fear. Others took videos with their phones. No one had seen anything like this before. Commander Zex Thalor stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the primitive planet through the view screen. His gray skin reflected the blue glow of Earth, and his four eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the sensor readings. He wore an elaborate uniform with gold armor plates and dozens of medals that showed his rank and battle victories. All Hegemony officers dressed this way. It was tradition. It was expected. Another simple conquest for the glory of the Hegemony, Zex Thalor said to his officers. They all nodded in agreement. Their species had conquered hundreds of worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Earth would be no different. "Sir, we're detecting military activity on the surface," reported Sub-Commander Veldrak. His uniform was slightly less ornate than his commanders, with fewer medals and duller armor. "They appear to be gathering their forces." "Of course they are," said Zex Thalor with a laugh. "Let them. We will show them our might, and they will surrender like all the others." The Hegemony had a simple approach to war. They believed in overwhelming force, distinctive uniforms, and visible ranks. Every soldier wore armor that showed their position and achievements. The higher the rank, the more elaborate the uniform. Their warriors trained for years to earn each piece of their battle gear. They believed that true warriors should be recognized at first glance. Down on Earth, the United Defense Command Center buzzed with activity. Admiral Lydia Ward stood in front of a large screen showing the alien ships in orbit. She wore a simple, navy blue suit. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was one of the most powerful military leaders on the planet. "What do we know about them?" she asked the room of analysts and officers. "They call themselves the Galactic Hegemony," said one analyst. "From what we can tell, they've conquered many worlds. They seem to have a highly structured military, very formal, very visible. They've set up a forward command post in Central Park," said another officer. "Their soldiers are, well, they're hard to miss." The screen showed images of alien soldiers marching through the park. Each wore bright-colored armor covered in symbols and badges. Their helmets had tall crests that changed color based on rank. They moved in perfect formation, weapons held high. "They certainly like to show off," said Lydia. She tapped her finger on the table. "Let's send in Fleming's team." Noah Fleming sat at a hot dog stand near Central Park. He wore jeans, a faded t-shirt, and a baseball cap. Next to him, Allison Perry sipped a coffee, dressed in a sundress and sandals. Across the street, Dave Martinez pretended to read a newspaper while wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt. 3 more team members were spread out nearby, all in everyday clothes. None of them looked like soldiers. That was the point. Noah's phone buzzed. He read the message and nodded to Allison. It was time. "Remember, we need one of their officers alive," he said quietly into his hidden microphone. "We need to understand their communications." The 6 team members moved casually toward different entrances of the park. To anyone watching, they looked like regular civilians curious about the aliens. The Hegemony guards paid little attention to them. Why would they? These humans wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, and displayed no rank insignia. They couldn't possibly be warriors. Noah walked right past 2 alien guards. They stood tall in their gleaming armor but barely glanced at him. He was just another human in plain clothes, not a threat. Not important. Inside the park, the Hegemony had set up force fields and scanning equipment around their temporary base. Noah spotted their command center, a dome-shaped building surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. All the aliens wore their elaborate battle gear, making it easy to identify the leadership. "I count 15 guards on the outer perimeter," Noah said quietly. "Their officer is the one with the red crest and gold shoulder pads." "Got it," Allison replied from her position. She was sitting on a park bench, pretending to take photos of birds. Dave moved closer to the western edge of the perimeter. He stumbled, slightly, appearing drunk to any observers. The alien guards watched him with disgust but didn't consider him dangerous. "I'm in position," Dave said. "Ready when you are." 3 minutes, said Noah. He walked to a nearby tree and bent down to tie his shoe. From his pocket he removed a small device and placed it against the ground. The device sent a pulse through the soil that temporarily disrupted the hegemony's sensors. For 30 seconds, their scanners would be blind. "Now," Noah said. His team moved with sudden precision. All pretense of being ordinary civilians vanished as they slipped through the brief gap in the hegemony's defenses. They moved like shadows, quiet and efficient. Each carried small concealed weapons that made no sound. Within 2 minutes they had neutralized 12 guards without raising an alarm. Not a single shot was fired. They used nerve suppressors that left the aliens unconscious but alive. Noah approached the command center with Allison and Dave. The remaining team members secured the perimeter. The hegemony officer with the red crest was inside, studying a holographic map of New York. "Sir, we've lost contact with Perimeter Team 3, reported one of the alien technicians. Before the officer could respond, Noah and his team were inside. 3 quick shots from their suppressors and only the officer remained conscious. The alien reached for his weapon, but Dave already had it. The officer stared at them in shock and confusion. "How did you get in here? Where are your battle armors? Where are your rank insignia?" the alien demanded. Noah smiled slightly. "We don't need them." Back on the hegemony flagship, Commander Zexathalor received an urgent communication. His forward command post had gone dark. All contact lost. Before he could send reinforcements, a transmission came through on their own secure channel. Admiral Lydia Ward's face appeared on the view screen. "Commander Zexathalor, I presume? This is Admiral Ward of Earth's United Defense Command. We have your officers. I suggest we talk." Zexathalor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. "How did you breach our defenses? Our warriors are the finest in the galaxy." "Perhaps," said Lydia with a slight smile, "but you don't understand how we fight. Your first lesson about humans. Our deadliest soldiers don't advertise what they are." The commander looked at the footage from his captured base. The humans who had taken it wore no uniforms, no armor, no visible weapons until the last moment. They had walked right past his guards looking like ordinary people. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zexathalor felt something new. Uncertainty. This would not be like their other conquests. These humans fought differently. They hid their warriors in plain sight, and he had no idea how to fight an enemy he couldn't identify. The Hegemony War Council gathered in the grand chamber of their flagship. 12 senior commanders sat around a large circular table. Each wore elaborate uniforms that gleamed under the bright lights. Their medals clinked as they shifted in their seats. Commander Zexathalor stood at the head of the table, his 4 eyes narrowed with concern. "This planet is different," he said. "These humans do not fight like any species we have encountered before." "Nonsense," said War Master Krell. His uniform was the most elaborate of all, with shoulder plates that extended 2 feet on each side and a helmet with 3 tall spikes. "They are primitive. Their technology is far behind ours. Yet they breached our forward command post without firing a single energy weapon," Zexathalor replied. "Their warriors walked past our guards wearing civilian clothes. No armor, no rank, insignia, no battle decorations," the council members murmured among themselves. This violated everything they understood about warfare. In their culture, a warrior's status was displayed for all to see. Their elaborate uniforms and armor told the story of their battles and victories. The idea of elite fighters disguised as ordinary people seemed dishonorable. "We must learn more about their tactics," said Intelligence Director Mevellana. She wore slightly less ornate armor than the others, but her chest plate still displayed 27 badges of intelligence. "Victories. I suggest we send an observer to study them up close." "Agreed," said Zexathalor. "But who?" All eyes turned to Senior Intelligence Officer Kyle Bennett. He was the only human in the room, captured 3 years ago during a deep space exploration mission. He had been studying the hegemony ever since, learning their language and customs. The aliens had never considered him a threat. He was just a scientist, not a warrior. They could tell by his lack of physical strength and fighting skills. At least that's what they believed. "Bennett, you will return to Earth as our spy," ordered Zexathalor. "Find out why their deadliest soldiers dress like civilians. Learn their secrets." Kyle nodded. "I'll need to blend in. No tracking devices. No communication equipment that might be detected." The hegemony commanders agreed reluctantly. They didn't fully trust the human, but they needed information. 2 days later, Kyle walked down a busy street in Seattle. He wore jeans, a sweatshirt, and sneakers, clothes provided by the hegemony based on their observations of Earth fashion. He carried a backpack and looked like any other person on the street. No one gave him a second glance. Kyle smiled to himself. The hegemony had no idea that before being an astronaut, he had been part of Earth's special forces. They had chosen the perfect person to infiltrate Earth, someone who was already loyal to it. His first stop was a small coffee shop. He ordered a drink and sat near the window watching people pass by. His real mission was to make contact with Earth's defense forces, but he needed to be careful. The hegemony might be watching. Across the city, in an underground command center, Admiral Lydia Ward studied the report on her tablet. "So Bennett is back," she said. "And the hegemony thinks he's their spy." "Yes, Admiral," said Lieutenant Rick Murray. "He activated his emergency signal an hour ago. Very brief, just enough for us to detect." "Where is he now?" "Coffee shop on 5th Avenue. We have people watching the area but keeping their distance." Lydia nodded. "Good. Let him come. To us. We don't want to spook the aliens if they're monitoring him somehow." Meanwhile, aboard the hegemony flagship, preparations were underway for a larger assault on Earth. War Master Krell didn't believe in subtle approaches. He wanted to show Earth the full might of the hegemony's military power. "We will land 10,000 warriors in their major cities," he declared to his officers, "each in full battle armor. The humans will see our strength and surrender." But even as they planned their attack, Earth was already infiltrating their defenses. Sergeant Olivia Cruz adjusted her tool belt as she walked through the service corridors of the hegemony flagship. She wore a gray jumpsuit with a patch that identified her as maintenance crew, a disguise created based on observations of the alien ship. 5 other team members spread out through different sections of the vessel, all dressed the same way. "Section 3 clear," Olivia whispered into her hidden microphone, moving to environmental control. None of the alien soldiers paid attention to the maintenance workers. The hegemony's strict hierarchy meant that warriors didn't concern themselves with support staff. Olivia and her team exploited this blind spot perfectly. They planted tiny surveillance devices throughout the ship, focusing on command areas and weapon systems. The devices would transmit data back to Earth, giving humans insight into hegemony technology and plans. Olivia turned a corner and came face to face with a hegemony officer. His armor gleamed with polished metals and his helmet crest marked him as a senior commander. "Human," he said sharply. "What are you doing in this section?" Olivia smiled and gestured to the air vent beside her. "Fixing environmental systems. Sir, we've had reports of temperature fluctuations on this deck." She held up a tool from her belt. "Almost done here." The officer looked at her plain jumpsuit and lack of weapons or rank insignia. In his mind, this confirmed she was a low-level worker not worth his time or concern. He nodded curtly and continued down the corridor. Olivia waited until he was gone, then quickly placed another surveillance device inside the air vent. "They really don't get it," she whispered to her team. "They can't imagine that someone without fancy armor could be dangerous." Back on Earth, Kyle Bennett had made his way to a public park. He sat on a bench, apparently enjoying the sunshine while watching children play nearby. To anyone observing, he looked like a man taking a break from work. A woman sat down next to him. She wore running clothes and had a water bottle in her hand. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was Major Susan Foster, one of Earth's top intelligence officers. "Nice day," she said casually. "Could use a little less sun," Kyle replied. The recognition phrase, Susan nodded slightly. "Welcome back. We've missed you at the office." My new co-workers are very interested in why you don't all wear uniforms, Kyle said, keeping his voice low. They can't understand how to identify your best fighters. That's the point, Susan said, with a small smile. What's their next move? Full assault. 10,000 troops in major cities, all in full battle gear with heavy weapons. Kyle shook his head. They still don't get it. They think bigger, flashier displays of force will win. Susan stood up, stretching as if finishing her rest during a run. Let them think that. We'll be ready. She jogged away, looking like any other runner in the park. On the Hegemony flagship, Commander Zex Thalor received an alert. Something was wrong with their systems. Data was being transmitted from their ship, but they couldn't trace the source. It's impossible, said his technology officer. We've scanned for human infiltrators. There are none aboard except the authorized maintenance workers. Zex Thalor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as a terrible thought occurred to him. Check those workers immediately. All of them. But by then, Olivia and her team had already completed their mission and departed on a supply shuttle. The Hegemony's greatest weakness was now clear. They couldn't imagine that their deadliest enemies would choose to look ordinary. 3 months had passed since the Hegemony ships first appeared above Earth. In that time, they had established bases in several locations, but had not launched their full invasion. Commander Zex Thalor had convinced the War Council to delay the major assault until they better understood the human way of fighting. Kyle Bennett walked down a busy street in Seattle, stopping to buy a coffee at a small shop on the corner. For 3 months, he had been sending reports back to the Hegemony. Most of what he told them was useless information, or things they could easily observe themselves. The important details he kept hidden. The coffee shop was warm and smelled of fresh pastries. Kyle found a table by the window and sat down. He liked this spot because it gave him a good view of the street. As he sipped his drink, he noticed 3 men enter the shop. They wore dark clothes and moved with a purpose that didn't match their casual appearance. Kyle immediately recognized them as robbers before they even pulled out their weapons. "Everyone on the floor. This is a robbery," shouted one man, showing a gun. People screamed and dropped to the floor. Kyle slowly moved to comply, watching carefully. From the corner of his eye, he saw a middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket put down his coffee mug. The man seemed calm, almost bored. What happened next was so fast that Kyle almost missed it. The man in the leather jacket, who Kyle would later learn was named Frank Nichols, moved with incredible speed and precision. In less than 5 seconds, all 3 robbers were on the ground unconscious. Frank had taken them down without even spilling his coffee. The most amazing part was what happened next. Frank simply returned to his seat and continued drinking his coffee as if nothing unusual had occurred. When police arrived minutes later, he gave a brief statement and left without fanfare. Kyle followed him at a distance. This was exactly the kind of thing the Hegemony couldn't understand. This man, dressed like any ordinary civilian, possessed combat skills that would impress even the most decorated Hegemony warrior. Yet he wore no uniform, displayed no rank, and sought no recognition for his abilities. Later that evening, Kyle sent a message to his Hegemony handlers. He had made a breakthrough discovery about humans. They don't reserve combat prowess for designated warriors, he wrote. Any of them could be lethal. Their civilian appearance isn't deception, it's their philosophy. Power hidden, not flaunted. On the Hegemony flagship, Commander Zex Thalor read Kyle's report with growing concern. The War Council refused to believe it. "Impossible," declared War Master Krell, his elaborate armor clanking as he pounded the table. "No society functions this way. Warriors must be set apart. They must be honored with distinctive appearances." "Yet, we have seen it ourselves," argued Zex Thalor. "Their teams infiltrate our bases dressed as civilians. They hide their weapons. They conceal their abilities until the moment they strike." The debate continued for hours, with most of the council dismissing Kyle's report. They couldn't imagine a military culture so different from their own. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Lydia Ward prepared for a diplomatic meeting with the Hegemony leadership. Earth's governments had agreed to negotiations, hoping to avoid full-scale war. "Are we sure this is wise?" asked Lieutenant Rick Murray. Meeting them face to face gives them a chance to study us up close. That works both ways, Lydia replied. And they've requested this meeting. I'm curious to see what they want. The meeting was set for neutral ground, a conference room in the United Nations building in New York. Both sides agreed to bring only a small delegation. The hegemony arrived first. Admiral Kravosh led their group, his uniform more elaborate than any they had seen before. Gold plates covered his chest and shoulders, decorated with hundreds of small symbols representing his victories. His helmet had a crest that changed colors with his mood. Behind him stood 6 other officers, each wearing armor that showed their rank and achievements. Lydia arrived with Ambassador Grace Harper and 4 other team members. All wore simple business suits. Nothing about their appearance suggested their military backgrounds or combat abilities. Admiral Kravosh stared at them with obvious contempt. This is your delegation? Where are your warriors? Ambassador Harper smiled politely. We're all here, Admiral. Shall we begin? The hegemony officers exchanged confused glances. They had expected Earth's representatives to include visibly identified military personnel. Before we start, Admiral Kravosh said with a sneer, I must comment on your strange customs. In the hegemony, our greatest warriors proudly display their achievements. Your warriors hide like cowards among civilians. The Earth delegation remained calm. Ambassador Harper's smile never wavered as she leaned forward slightly. There's an ancient Earth saying, Admiral, the deadliest predators are those you never see coming. The meeting proceeded with discussions of boundaries and non-aggression pacts. Nothing was resolved, but both sides agreed to continue talks. As they departed, Lydia noticed the hegemony officers watching them closely, trying to determine which members of Earth's team might be military. That night, as the hegemony delegation returned to their ships, 12 of their command vessels suddenly went dark. Communication systems failed. Navigation controls stopped responding. Life support remained functional, but nothing else worked. On the flagship, Commander Zex Thaler received urgent messages from the affected ships. Unknown system failure, they reported. No signs of attack or sabotage. But Zex Thaler knew better. He ordered security teams to check for human infiltrators. They found nothing. No breaches in their security protocols. No unauthorized entries to their ships. What they didn't realize was that humans had walked aboard wearing hegemony service uniforms and carrying cleaning supplies. The ship's warriors had been trained to ignore support staff. The humans had planted small devices throughout each vessel, then left before the systems failed. In her office, Admiral Lydia Ward received confirmation of the successful operation. 12 ships neutralized without firing a shot, reported Olivia Cruz. They never even knew we were there. And their diplomatic delegation? Asked Lydia. Olivia smiled. They were so busy looking for hidden weapons that they didn't notice when Grace planted tracking devices on each of them. Ambassador Harper, who had led the diplomatic meeting, was also a top field operative. While exchanging formal greetings, with the hegemony officers she had placed nearly undetectable trackers on their elaborate uniforms. Now Earth could monitor their movements throughout the solar system. On the hegemony flagship, Commander Zex Thaler faced a difficult conversation with the War Council. We must reconsider our understanding of human warfare, he insisted. Their approach defies our traditions, but we cannot deny its effectiveness. War Master Krell remained unconvinced. More troops, more displays of force. We will overwhelm them with our might. And how will you identify their warriors? Asked Zex Thaler. How will you know who to fight when their deadliest soldiers look like everyone else? The council had no answer. Their entire military doctrine assumed that warriors would be clearly marked and that civilians would be separate from combatants. Earth's approach confused and frightened them. As night fell over Earth, Kyle Bennett sat in a secure room beneath the Pentagon. He had been extracted earlier that day, his mission as a pretend spy complete. He gave his final report to Admiral Ward and her staff. They still don't understand, he said. They can't imagine a society where power is hidden rather than displayed. It goes against everything they believe. Lydia nodded. Then we'll continue to use that against them. Let them look for uniforms and ranks while our people walk right past their defenses. The next phase of Earth's defense was already in motion. Across the planet, soldiers trained in plain clothes, learning to hide their abilities until the moment they were needed. The hegemony's greatest weakness was now clear. They couldn't fight what they couldn't identify. And on Earth, the deadliest, predators wore no uniforms at all. The Hegemony War Council made their decision. Despite Commander Zexathaler's warnings, War Master Krell convinced the others that overwhelming force was the answer. They would send soldiers in even more elaborate battle armor, with even larger weapons. They believed greater displays of military might would finally intimidate Earth's forces. Let them see the true power of the hegemony, Krell declared. His new ceremonial armor was so massive he could barely move in it. The shoulder plates extended 3 feet on either side, and his helmet crest now changed colors to match his words as he spoke. When they witness our glory, they will surrender. Commander Zexthaler disagreed but was overruled. He watched as the council approved plans for a major assault on Earth's major cities. Thousands of hegemony warriors prepared for battle, polishing their armor and weapons to ensure they looked their most impressive. On Earth, Admiral Lydia Ward received intelligence about the planned attack. The tracking devices planted by Ambassador Harper provided detailed information about hegemony movements. They're doubling down on their strategy, Lydia told her officers. More elaborate uniforms, bigger weapons, more visible displays of force. They've learned nothing, said Lieutenant Rick Murray. That works in our favor, Lydia replied. Prepare all teams for Operation Shadow. Across the planet, Earth's defense forces mobilized, but unlike traditional military operations, there were no massive troop movements, no obvious preparations. Instead, individuals and small teams moved quietly into position. They carried hidden weapons and equipment. Most wore civilian clothes, or service uniforms that would allow them to blend in with regular people. Among these teams was a group led by Amy Daniels. 5 years ago, she had been a librarian in a small town. Now she was one of Earth's most effective special operatives. Her team had a critical mission, capturing the hegemony's supreme tactical AI which controlled their battle coordination. Remember, we need to be invisible until the last possible moment, Amy told her team as they prepared. The hegemony is looking for warriors. We'll give them none to see. Her team dressed as refugees, wearing torn clothes and carrying small bundles of belongings. Intelligence had discovered that the hegemony was bringing some humans aboard their vessels for study, focusing on those displaced by the conflict. When the hegemony landing craft touched down to collect human subjects, Amy and her team shuffled forward with the other refugees. They kept their heads down, appearing weak and frightened. The hegemony soldiers barely glanced at them, seeing only helpless civilians. Once aboard the ship, the refugees were separated into different holding areas. Amy's team was placed near the central computer core, exactly as planned. While the other refugees huddled together in fear, Amy's team quietly worked. Using small tools hidden in their tattered clothes, they accessed maintenance panels and bypassed security systems. Within hours, they had reached the chamber housing the tactical AI core. 2 hegemony warriors stood guard at the entrance, their elaborate armor gleaming under the bright lights. They looked formidable with their large weapons and tall helmet crests. Amy approached them, hunched over and looking weak. "Please," she said in a shaky voice. "My child is sick. We need help." The guards looked down at her with contempt. One raised his weapon slightly, warning her to stay back. Neither considered her a threat. In their minds, a true warrior would be clearly marked as such, wearing appropriate battle gear and displaying rank. The moment the guard raised his weapon, Amy struck. Her movements were lightning fast as she disabled both guards before they could react. No alarm sounded. No one saw what happened. "Clear," she whispered to her team. "Move in." They entered the AI chamber and quickly went to work. The hegemony's greatest tactical advantage was this artificial intelligence, which coordinated all their military operations. Amy's team didn't destroy it, they reprogrammed it. Small changes that would cause subtle malfunctions during battle. Nothing obvious enough to detect, but enough to create chaos when the hegemony launched their attack. Meanwhile, on Earth, other teams moved into position. The hegemony had established bases in several major cities, preparing for their grand assault. At each location, humans infiltrated their defenses in different disguises. Outside the hegemony embassy in Washington, D.C., Colonel Eric Dawson tended the flowers in the garden. He had worked there for weeks, hired by the aliens to maintain the grounds. They never suspected that the quiet gardener was monitoring all their communications as he worked. In a bar frequently visited by hegemony officers in London, Major Samantha Klein served drinks with a friendly smile. Each conversation she overheard provided valuable intelligence. The officers spoke freely around her, seeing only a service worker, not a threat. At hegemony bases around the world, humans who appeared to be janitors, cooks, drivers, and maintenance workers gathered information and sabotaged equipment. None wore uniforms or carried visible weapons. All looked like ordinary people doing ordinary jobs. The day of the hegemony's grand assault arrived. Their massive ships moved into position above Earth's major cities. War Master Krell stood on the bridge of the flagship, his enormous ceremonial armor now enhanced with glowing lights that pulsed with each word he spoke. "Today we show these humans true military might," he declared to his officers. "Launch the attack." Across the hegemony fleet, warriors prepared for battle. They had polished their armor to a high shine. Their weapons were upgraded to look even more impressive. They moved toward their landing craft in perfect formation, a stunning display of military discipline and power. But when they tried to launch their weapons, systems failed. Navigation controls gave incorrect coordinates. Communication devices broadcast static. The reprogrammed tactical AI was creating small but critical errors throughout their network. On the flagship, War Master Krell raged as reports of malfunctions poured in. "What is happening?" he demanded. "How is this possible?" Commander Zexthaler studied the patterns of failure. "The humans," he said quietly. "They've been inside our systems. Impossible. Our ships are guarded by our finest warriors." "Warriors who look only for other warriors," Zexthaler replied. "Not for service workers or refugees or maintenance staff." As the hegemony struggled to fix their systems, Earth launched its counterattack. But it wasn't a traditional military assault. There were no massive formations of troops, no obvious targets for the hegemony to strike at. Instead, countless small operations unfolded simultaneously. Teams that had infiltrated hegemony ships activated hidden devices. Engineers who had serviced their weapons days earlier had made tiny adjustments that now caused failures. Communication specialists who had studied their technology now jammed their signals. The hegemony's carefully planned assault dissolved into confusion. Their ships remained in orbit, unable to coordinate their attacks. Their warriors, so impressive in their elaborate armor, had no enemies to fight. The humans they could see were civilians, not combatants. War Master Krell's grand armor now felt heavy and useless as he watched his plans fall apart. For the first time, he began to understand what Commander Zexthaler had been telling him. The humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to hide in plain sight. "How do you fight an enemy you cannot see?" Zexthaler asked quietly. "How do you defeat warriors who look like everyone else?" Krell had no answer. The hegemony's entire approach to warfare was based on clear identification of combatants. They had never imagined a society where the most dangerous individuals might look completely ordinary. As night fell over Earth, the hegemony's grand assault had failed before it truly began. Their elaborate displays of military might had only made them easier targets for Earth's hidden defenders. The lesson was becoming painfully clear. Sometimes the deadliest soldiers were those who dressed like civilians. The galactic hegemony faced something they had never experienced before: defeat. Their remaining ships retreated to a defensive position in Earth's orbit. For 3 weeks, they maintained this position while trying to repair their damaged systems and restore their tactical AI. Commander Zexthaler stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth through the view screen. His elaborate uniform felt heavy on his shoulders. For the first time in his military career, he questioned the traditions he had followed his entire life. "Commander," called his communication officer. "We're receiving a message from the Hegemony Council." Zex Thalor nodded. The council had been silent since the failed attack. Now they wanted answers. The stern face of War Minister Zax Volmar appeared on the screen. His elaborate ceremonial armor covered most of his body, with a helmet that extended a full foot above his head. Even in defeat, the council maintained their traditions. "Commander Zex Thalor," said the War Minister, "explain this failure." Zex Thalor took a deep breath. "War Minister, we face an enemy unlike any we have encountered before. The humans do not fight according to proper military traditions. Their deadliest warriors hide among civilians. They infiltrate our ships wearing service uniforms. They sabotage our systems from within." "This is dishonorable," protested Zax Volmar. "Warriors should identify themselves as such." "Perhaps to us," said Zex Thalor. "But their approach is effective. We cannot defeat an enemy we cannot identify." There was a long silence as the War Minister considered this. Finally, he spoke again. "The Council has decided. You will negotiate peace terms with Earth. The Hegemony must learn from this unusual situation." On Earth, Admiral Lydia Ward received the request for peace talks with cautious optimism. Intelligence reports showed the Hegemony fleet was crippled, their supply lines compromised by humans who had infiltrated every level of their operation. "They're finally ready to talk," Lydia told her officers. "But we negotiate from strength, not weakness." The peace conference was set for a neutral location, an orbital station positioned between Earth and the Hegemony fleet. Both sides would send small delegations. Ambassador Grace Harper led Earth's team. She wore a simple business suit, as did the 4 others who accompanied her. Nothing about their appearance suggested their military backgrounds or combat abilities. The Hegemony delegation arrived in their traditional elaborate uniforms. Commander Zex Thalor led them, but his armor was noticeably less ornate than before. He had removed some of the more decorative elements, leaving a simpler, more functional design. "Welcome," said Grace. "Shall we begin?" The negotiations lasted 3 days. The Hegemony, accustomed to dictating terms to conquered worlds, found themselves in an unfamiliar position. Earth demanded recognition as a sovereign planet and guarantees against future aggression. On the final day, Commander Zex Thalor made an unexpected request. "We wish to learn from you," he said. "The Hegemony has conquered many worlds, but none have fought like Earth. We propose a cultural exchange program. Our officers would train on Earth, learning your methods." Grace conferred with her team before responding. "We accept, with conditions. Knowledge sharing must go both ways, and no hostile actions against Earth or its allies." Zex Thalor agreed. The peace treaty was prepared for signing. Meanwhile, in the Hegemony Council chamber, War Minister Zax Volmar addressed the gathered leaders. His speech was broadcast throughout their empire. "The humans have taught us that true power lies not in its display but in its application," he said, his voice carrying to millions of Hegemony citizens. "Their deadliest warriors hide in plain sight not out of cowardice, but because they understand what we've forgotten. War is not about appearance but effectiveness." It was a difficult admission for the tradition-bound Hegemony. For generations they had believed that warriors must be clearly marked, that power must be visible to all. Now they faced a fundamental shift in their understanding. Back at the peace conference, Ambassador Harper and Commander Zex Thalor signed the treaty. As they shook hands, Zex Thalor noticed something, a small scar on Grace's wrist, the kind that came from combat training. "You're not just a diplomat, are you?" he asked quietly. Grace smiled. "On Earth we can be many things. That's what your people never understood." The signing ceremony concluded, and both delegations prepared to leave. As they walked toward their ships, Zex Thalor continued to study the humans. Now that he knew what to look for, he saw subtle signs he had missed before. The way they scanned rooms, their alert posture, the calluses on their hands. They were all warriors, he said to his second-in-command. Every member of their delegation. But they wore no uniforms, no rank insignia, protested the officer. That is precisely the point, replied Zexithalor. The first hegemony officers arrived on Earth a month later to begin the exchange program. They came wearing their traditional uniforms, though somewhat simplified from their previous designs. They were met by Earth instructors dressed in plain clothes. The training began with a simple exercise. The hegemony officers were taken to a busy city square and asked to identify which people in the crowd were military personnel. That one, said one officer, pointing to a muscular man in a tight-fitting shirt. And that one, he added, indicating a woman with short hair and good posture. The Earth instructor shook his head. The muscular man is a dance teacher, the woman is a store clerk. He pointed to a gray-haired man feeding pigeons, a teenage girl with bright blue hair, and a heavy-set middle-aged woman carrying shopping bags. Those are our special forces operatives, 30 years of combat experience between them. The hegemony officers were stunned. Everything they had believed about warfare was being challenged. As the exchange program continued, some hegemony officers adapted better than others. Commander Zexithalor embraced the new concepts, gradually modifying his uniform until it was almost plain. He learned to look beyond appearances, to recognize that true skill needed no advertisement. 6 months after the peace treaty, Captain Diane Miller stood at the window of a small civilian transport vessel, watching as the last hegemony ships departed Earth's solar system. She wore simple travel clothes, jeans and a sweater. Nothing about her appearance revealed that she commanded Earth's deadliest special forces unit. Next to her stood Commander Zexithalor, now wearing a simple hegemony uniform with minimal decorations. He had been the most successful student in the exchange program and would take Earth's lessons back to his people. Your warriors will always be at a disadvantage if they announce themselves with elaborate uniforms, Diane said. Zexithalor nodded. Traditions change slowly, but we have learned much from Earth. The next generation of hegemony soldiers will be different. And the treaty? Asked Diane. It will be honored, promised Zexithalor. The hegemony has gained something more valuable than conquered territory: new understanding. As the hegemony ships disappeared into the darkness of space, Diane thought about the lesson they had learned. The universe would now understand why Earth's deadliest soldiers dress like civilians. True power needs no announcement. The most dangerous predators are rarely the most visible, and in discarding the trappings of war, one often becomes more effective at waging it. Earth had defended itself not with superior technology or numbers, but with a different philosophy. The hegemony, with all their elaborate traditions and displays of power, had finally learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies in appearing ordinary. And as for Earth, its people would continue as they always had, going about their daily lives while remaining ready to defend their home. Their soldiers would walk among them, indistinguishable from anyone else until the moment their skills were needed. This was their strength. This was their way. And now, it was their legacy, to the stars.